Hey everyone, welcome to News to the Science, where we discuss comics, movies, games, and more, bringing you some more information about the Daily Bugle. So, if you've recently watched the recent rebooted Spider-Man films, from The Amazing Spider-Man to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming, and of course the upcoming Far From Home, you notice that a particular thing is missing and certain characters that we all love and know are missing. And that is, of course, the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson. Of course, those characters have been missing in those movies up until like recently. Back on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, J. Jonah Jameson was ridiculously shoehorned in one scene, and it wasn't even an appearance of the character. It was basically a text message conversation exchange between Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, and J. Jonah Jameson, supposedly doing a blog, which felt incredibly and stupidly, ridiculously shoehorned. And we're going to go ahead and discuss the absence of the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson. And MCU addresses that clearly here in this article. So, bringing you the article from superherohype.com. Aside from the off-screen and ultimately shoehorned in presence in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, like I said before, it's been 12 years since J. Jonah Jameson and his Daily Bugle cohorts last graced the silver screen in Spider-Man 3. Many assumed this was because J.K. Simmons gave such a standout performance as a character in the original trilogy. In fact, some fans have called for Simmons to reprise the role even through the Spider-Man franchise has long since been rebooted. But according to Spider-Man Far From Home producer Eric Carroll, it's about more than just finding the right actors. Via Cinnamon Blend, Carroll revealed that Marvel Studios hasn't ruled out bringing Jameson, Robbie Robertson, etc. all into the MCU fold. However, they've struggled a big when it comes to introducing them in a way that doesn't rehash previous films. We've absolutely talked and thought about those characters a lot, said Carroll, even in specific references to this film, and what we just want to make sure we're doing is presenting them in a way that doesn't make you feel instantly like you've seen it before. So we have a couple of ideas, some of which I really can't go into detail because they're a spoiler, but it's absolutely something. The world has also changed a lot since 2007, which is when Spider-Man 3 came out. Not only has the rise of social media flipped the news industry on its head, but the fact that most smartphone cameras allow anyone to take high quality snapshots poses an issue as well. Like, if we had an in for the Daily Bugle that wasn't just your traditional newspaper and Peter Parker, there's this cool weird thing happening where being a photographer isn't necessarily a mark of distinction anymore. We all have better cameras in our pockets than most people owned 10 years ago. Carroll went on to explain the bringing that the Daily Bugle into the modern age would require some reinvention, and I wholeheartedly agree. So, how do we get Peter or somebody into that world without, do people really aspire to be photographers for the New York Times anymore? Carroll asked, or do they aspire to have their tweet reposted and so on? So, we're trying to pay as much homage to the source material as possible, and we do think there are a couple of fun ideas like that in here. Again, most of which I don't want to spell out for you, but we want to pull out as much of the mythology that people love in a way that's totally faithful and what people love about it, but in a way that doesn't remind you he is Spider-Man. So how would you like to see the MCU introduce the Daily Bugle into the Spider-Man series? Who would you cast to play Jameson? So first off, a couple of points I want to touch upon, because there's a lot of valid, good points that were brought up on in this article. First off, I want to say that J.K. Simmons should reprise his role. The guy did a stellar job. He was phenomenal. It's like I was watching the classic cartoons and the animated series. He captured the spirit and overall the way Jameson is in the comics and from the shows and the cartoons. And I would love to see that man reprise his role. Hands down, the definitive, ultimate, quintessential J. Jonah Jameson. Next off, a couple of points that I do want to bring up from this article that I thought were completely valid and just perfect. The idea of a photographer wanting to work for a newspaper company is just completely off the table. I mean, we've come a long way since 2007. Hell, since 2002. And that's why those Spider-Man movies from 2002 to 2007 has worked. They are dated in a way where we still have a photographer submitting photos of Spider-Man or sightings of superheroes or anything like that to a paper. Exclusive photographers for a New York paper. But now, with people having smartphones in their pockets with phenomenal camera quality, for example, i.e. this one, this is a 4K camera on an iPhone XS Max, and it records 4K 30. Cell phones were still at its infancy around that time, between the 2002 to 2007 era. Hell, even 2007 was the first year the first iPhone was introduced. And yet, it still wasn't prevalent at that time for anybody to have a decent camera in their phones. And those cameras sucked, by the way. Now, it's fair game. Anybody can pull out their phone, quick snap a picture, bam, you got a decent photo. It's leaked online for everybody else to see. And it really killed the newspaper industry. And again, we live in a time where being a photographer isn't necessarily a mark of distinction anymore. And it really isn't. I mean, I have a decent camera, for God's sakes. I could have been a photographer back in 2002 for a New York paper. So again, if we were to bring J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle in itself and J. Jonah Jameson would have to be reinvented for today's modern standards. And it's true. Now, if you look at the comics, J. Jonah Jameson doesn't work for the paper anymore. He doesn't run the Daily Bugle anymore. It's Robbie Robertson that's running the Daily Bugle actually currently in the comics. J. Jonah Jameson is in fact a blogger in the comics right now, which is perfect for today's social norms. Bloggers have flipped the newspaper industry upside down and have killed them. Like, bloggers are basically the Uber drivers of the newspaper industry. Just like Uber killed the taxi industry. It's ridiculous. The world has really, really changed in a short amount of time. And I'm speaking from 2007, which is the last appearance of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. It's really changed. You can't really go find a job at a newspaper. People consume the medias in so many ways and so many forms. Now the standard way of consuming your media is through smartphones and tablets. Whether it's a video online, a leak, a tweet, or even a message on Facebook. You get the picture. So I wholeheartedly agree again with this article. If these characters, including the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson, Robbie Robertson, were to be brought into the MCU fold, they'd have to be completely reinvented. Perhaps make J. Jonah Jameson a blogger in the movies. Still a character. It'd basically be conforming to modern norms. And if you played Spider-Man PS4, J. Jonah Jameson's not running the Daily Bugle. He's running a radio talk show that's online. All you hear is his voice throughout the gameplay, basically updating New York City of the latest in Spider-Man and talking about controversies and conspiracy theories. And it's just the way it is. People just consume their information like that. They get filled in, they get stuck to their phones, and that's how they get their information. It's sad, but it's the truth. And honestly, if we were to get a Daily Bugle, or at least bring a paper into the MCU fold, we would basically scoff on how dated that idea would seem. So they would have to be incredibly creative to bring this character back, and of course bring the Daily Bugle back. So you let me know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Daily Bugle's absence in the MCU? And since they're addressing it, how do you think the Daily Bugle should debut in the MCU fold? You let me know your thoughts. Comment down below. Like this video if you haven't done so already. Please be sure to comment, subscribe, click on bell notifications so you all don't miss anything. And as always, I will see you all in the next comic panel.